Hello and welcome to your interview prep from the Avenica team. We are here to support you in any way that we can throughout your entire interview process. And one of the ways we like to support is by sharing this interview prep presentation. This prep is meant to help you feel prepared and ready to have a successful interview. So in this presentation, we'll cover introductions, closing, and really everything in between so that you feel confident walking into your next interview. Let's dive in. First and foremost, we'll start off with introductions with the person interviewing you. This is a great time to start building rapport with the interviewer before diving straight into the questions. This can also really help to calm nerves and feel like you have a relationship with the interviewer before, again, just jumping straight into the interview. One way to do this is to start with an icebreaker. Maybe talk about the weather, the city, a recent sports team win, how their morning has been going, really anything to start a small conversation with the interviewer and start building that person-to-person connection. You can also take this time to give a quick introduction. Give a brief overview of your skill sets, your experiences, things of that nature. But don't worry about going too in-depth here, since you'll have plenty of time to dive deeper into all of that information later in the interview. With all of that in mind, try to keep your intro or your brief conversation below 2 minutes in length. We've made it through introductions. Now it's time to showcase your interests. Not only do you want to be prepared to answer these questions in the interview, but it's also important to break these down for yourself, just to make sure you're truly aligning with the role and the company. You can start prepping for these questions by reviewing your notes that you took from your conversation with an Avenica team member when you were initially discussing the role, and also purely by doing research on the company. Check out their website. Showing your genuine interest and knowledge of the company is a great way to set you apart from other candidates. Now it's time to walk through your resume. This is your time to showcase your experience and all of the skill sets that you have to offer. You can plan on spending 2 to 3 minutes going through your resume, but remember that you don't want to read your resume word for word here. The interviewer has your resume in front of them, so they've read through it, they know what's on there, and they have a good idea of what you've done. They just want to hear it from your point of view now, and also hear about the experience that you gained from each role. Maybe share some highlights and accomplishments from a few of your past experiences, or even positive feedback that you received from customers, teammates, or leaders while you were in that role. At this point, be prepared to answer some tough questions about your resume as well. Maybe it's why you left a certain role, or maybe they'll be curious as to why you spent a short amount of time in a role. Or maybe they'll want to address any gaps in your resume. Remember, it's okay to have those gaps, just be sure that you're being transparent, honest, and open when you're discussing those. If you were a stay-at-home parent for a few years, great. Explain what skills you gained from that. If you took some time to study for a certification, awesome. Tell them what certification it was, what skills you learned, and how you plan to use those moving forward. All experience is good experience, whether it's in an office or not. You're in charge of leading that conversation around your experience and making sure that the interviewer knows all of the positive things that you gained as a result. Overall, keeping it positive and professional is the key here. Most interviews require a behavioral-based interview format. These are a great chance to highlight your unique skill sets. Overall, behavioral questions are designed to focus on your experience, behaviors, knowledge, skills, and abilities through specific examples, and specific is the key word here. Stay away from general answers and find one specific story to focus on in your answer. You can pull these from past work experience or even your education as well. These questions really allow you to provide an example of a time that you were able to handle a similar situation to the question that they're asking. This way, the employer can then predict your future behavior and performance in the role. Now that you know the purpose of the behavioral-based questions, you can really start preparing. These questions can be a little tricky, but with preparation and reflecting on your past experience, you'll have those examples ready to go so that you can quickly draw from them in the interview. Although you can't know exactly what questions will be asked, you can focus on what skills you do have and what the employer is looking for. So let's say that you're interviewing for a customer service role. You know that the role requires you to have strong communication skills, so try to think back on your past education or experience to a time that you used your communication skills. Doing this exercise will help you quickly pull those examples when you're actually in the interview and being asked those questions. Now, the best way to organize your thoughts and explain your example is through something called the STAR method. STAR is an acronym standing for Situation, Task, Action, and Result. So let's start with the S, situation. Express what company you were working at, what the situation was, or what was happening. This is the very first step in clearly setting up that story. Then we have T for task. Explain your role in the task. What were you trying to do? What was the goal? And then A is for action. What did you specifically do in the situation? What steps did you take? Why did you choose to do what you did? And what was the significance of the action that you took in order to set you up for those results? Which brings us to R for results. What was the outcome? Be sure to highlight what you learned and what skill sets you gained throughout that specific situation. And that's the STAR method. As you can see, it's not just about sharing the example. It's about sharing your ability to tell a story from start to finish, and most importantly, expressing the skill sets that you showcased and gained throughout that particular situation. Now let's practice. I'm going to go through an example, so see if you can pick out the situation, task, action, and result while I'm going through. So we'll take the question of describe a long-term project that you managed. For example, when I was working at Google, I was managing a web development team in charge of setting up a new website for one of our biggest clients. Most projects had to be done within 2 months, but this project was a little bit different. There was a lot more detail, and there were a lot of unique pages and different functionalities that needed to be included. So we had to make sure that we were very careful with our time and managing our time properly. We had a strict deadline of 14 weeks, so I had to make sure that we used that time as efficiently as possible. Before setting up the work, I decided that we should plan everything out by week. After some research and consulting with our development team, we decided to split the workload into different stages. So we would spend about a week in the discovery phase, 5 weeks in design, 3 weeks in initial development, and then the rest of the time would be spent on any modifications that needed to be made. In the end, we actually finished the website with all of the promised functionalities in just under 3 months. The client was super satisfied with the result and eventually ended up recommending other partners to our firm. So there's my example. For the situation, I mentioned where I was working and what the situation was. I was working at Google and I was managing that team in charge of setting up a new website. For the task, I gave that strict deadline that we were supposed to finish the project within. And then the action was what led us up to deciding to split the work up into different stages and then what that all entailed. Finally, for the result, I mentioned that in the end, we finished early and the client was satisfied, so satisfied that they recommended other partners to our firm. So this example really showcased my skill sets, and you can see that I kept it really clear and concise while still giving enough detail to really paint that picture in the interviewer's head of what was going on in that situation. Now it's time for you to ask questions. This is important not only to get to know more about the interviewer and the company, but also to express your enthusiasm and engagement in the role. You can write your questions on a piece of paper and bring them with you to the interview, but also be sure to write down a few extra questions. This is because some of your questions may be answered organically in conversation. So if that does happen, this will make sure you have a few backup questions. Here are a few examples of some questions you might like to ask in your interview. Feel free to pause the video here, take a screenshot, or even just jot down a few questions that really resonate with you. You did it! The hard part is over. Now it's time to wrap up and leave that great lasting impression. Remember to keep your closing short and sweet. You can really just re-emphasize your interest in the role and the company while also thanking them for their time. Finally, we'd love to leave you with a few tips and tricks for your next interview. Thank you so much for joining us for this presentation today. We are so confident that you're going to be great in your next interview, but we are also here if you have any additional questions along the way. Have a great day.